I'm not sure if everybody saw this or not, but Mark Richt is going to be inducted in 2023 in the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. It's really awesome. The activities are going to be at the Hall of Fame in late February. And there's, Mark more than deserves this. I don't think there's much question about that. I'm not sure how he escapes being in the College Football Hall of Fame, frankly, with all he did at Florida State and Georgia, just that alone. He's one of the most successful coaches in college history. So that's something to take note of for sure. There are a lot of folks that are in this. I do just want to say real quick, there are several people that I know, um, not well, but I know the I'm going to talk about Mark quite a bit, but Al Parker, who was a very good tennis player through the years, um, he is inducted. Stan Caston, who was with the Braves forever and the Hawks. Sean Jones from Thomasville. I don't know if y'all remember him or not, but he played at Georgia Tech. It was a very good player there. Andrew Jones from the Braves, obviously a huge um, moment in 1996. But Buck Godfrey was Southwest DeKalb's coach when I was in high school at Tucker. They won the state championship the year after I left Tucker in 1995, the season after I left Tucker. So Buck Godfrey was a legend in DeKalb County. And he's been the Georgia Coaches Hall of Fame in 2014, as well as the Atlanta Hall of Fame in 2010, Atlanta Sports Hall of Fame. But Mark, I mean, look, I don't know how much. I mean, he was 126 and 45 at Georgia, um, six East Division titles, of which not all of those. Some of those were shared. Two SEC championships, multiple Sugar Bowls. Um, you know, uh, there's just no question that Georgia would not be where it's at today without Mark Richt, and um, there was a particular instability that had occurred in the 90s and to some degree after Jim Donnan's tenure, at the end of it, it just was not the same. Georgia was not a national power, and Mark made them one, and there's just no question about that. And from his best stretch, no doubt, was '02 to '05, but that would also ignore, really good seasons in 7, 8, 11, 12, to some degree 14. So he dominated Georgia Tech. And that was not a series. I mean, he took over a Georgia program that had lost 3 games in a row to Georgia Tech. I mean, that was embarrassing. And, you know, to win the league after it had not been won for 20 years by Georgia. I mean, it's just kind of in the failure of that 20-year period. Uh, Georgia was just coasting. Georgia was just coasting, and it was watching as its bitter rival, Florida, was coming into power because of an exceptional head coach, Steve Spurrier. I mean, maybe if you don't have Steve Spurrier at Florida, Georgia isn't where it's at today either because of a lot of this is reaction to what you see around. And getting Mark Richt was a direct reaction to not just Georgia's struggles in the 90s, but a reaction to what Florida had done with their type of offense. Mark tried to bring that offense to the SEC, but I talked to him in early 2021, and he told me that his intent was to bring the hurry up to the SEC, but the officials would not allow them to do that. Um, you have to remember at the time, the SEC was not, it was still a very old school conference. Nick Saban didn't matter. It was dominated by Steve Spurrier, Phil Fulmer, uh, uh, Crazy Town, Lou Holtz. There were older coaches who had a particular style of play. That's not the way Florida State played. That's not the way that Mark wanted to play at Georgia. But he adapted. He had exceptional defensive players: David Pollock, Thomas Davis, Sean Jones. I'm leaving a million guys out. Kedrick Golston was one of their favorite guys from Sandy Creek. And Mark was just not an exceptional recruiter. It was not the end all be all for him. And over time, the league changed. And I don't think I have to explain why the league changed to celebrate Mark Richt. The league changed. It's going to change in the next 20 years as well. It will change in 4 years or 3 years when Texas and Oklahoma come into it. It will become a more complicated, tricky league. But when you look at the Auburn series, that changed because of Mark. When you look at the Tennessee series, that changed because of Mark. Georgia beat Tennessee once in division play before Mark Richt arrived. The wins over Auburn were not consistent. They had lost 3 games in a row to Georgia Tech. They had not beaten. They had beaten Florida once. They had beaten Tennessee once and Florida once. Since they went to the divisions, they had beaten Auburn, but it wasn't consistent at all. And some of those were just crazy town games, like 1996, 1992. I mean, these were just wild games. Mark changed Georgia for the better, no doubt. But I think the two things that he did really more than anything was he snuffed Tennessee right out. Tennessee's never been the same since Mark Richt got to Georgia. They a lot. That's not directly because of Mark, but they, Georgia became the second best team they became the best team in the division over that span of time. But there were dots of other teams being really good. Florida, obviously, under Urban for 2 of those 3 years. Well, 3 of those 4 years. And then he checked out. And Florida came back to earth. It has to be said that Mark changed that rivalry. In 2010, Georgia had lost however many games. They lost in 04. Excuse me, they lost every game in Mark's time except 04 and 07. Well, it took a while, but he finally turned the corner on that thing too. All of those things matter a lot. And it was Georgia not being functional in the SEC, and Georgia going from not winning games against their rivals to dominating 2 of them. That's just stuff that's because of Mark's steadiness. And the only thing that he did not have was a national championship. That's it. I mean, every single part of his career was excellence. And what I would argue is, and living long enough in life, that he did not win the national championship. I don't believe in luck. There are reasons why Georgia did not win the national championship under Mark. But I also know that we live in a different time. When Kirby Smart lost the SEC championship to Alabama, he got another shot at it. When Georgia was as hot as anybody in the country in 2002 and 2007, there was no playoff for Mark. Does that mean he's not a good coach? Or was he slightly before his time? I mean, the league changed too, and it became about players and not as much about coaching. That's maybe a harsh way of looking at it, but it has always been about the players. And I think the coaches, so to speak, if you're not minding the store on recruiting, you're in real trouble. And you have to recruit at an elite level now because of the way that the league has shifted towards just Alabama and just Georgia. And I think we're going to see that with LSU too. But don't give me this, he didn't win the national championship, therefore the X. You know who won the national championship? Gene Chizik, Jimbo Fisher, Larry Coker. It has to be said, those are not great coaches over the long term. Mark Richt never had a 4-8 season. He had one losing season at Georgia. I mean, look at what Jimbo's doing at Texas A&M. Look at Gene Chiswick's run at Auburn. Look at the way Larry Coker was run out of Miami. Mark is an exceptional head coach. He's not just sort of good. He's really good. And someone needs to say that out loud. People need to express, people who were there, me, Mark Weiser, Chip Towers, Josh Kendall, Carter Strickland, David Ching, David Pascal, the people who were there and saw it and lived it in real time, it's easy to forget how good Mark was. Everybody remembers the shortfalls. I was there for Florida in 15, Alabama in 15. I was there for the 2010 season. I was there for the 2015 season. It was bad. I was also there at Arkansas in 2014 and Missouri in 2014. I was there for the 2002 season and the 0-4 win over Nick Saban in Alabama. Excuse me, and LSU. Um, and you know, Mark was an exceptional coach, and that just needs to be said because I think it's going to be forgotten. I don't know over time if it will be forgotten, but I do think Kirby's going to put a couple national championships on the board, and it will make people forget about a lot of folks. Vince, Mark. These guys were really, really good coaches. I would say this: when you compare Vince's time at Georgia to Mark's time at Georgia, and you take Herschel Walker and you remove him from the situation, which you can't have Vince Dooley without Herschel Walker and vice versa. Those two are tied together in history. But Mark never had his one player who was caught he never had Herschel or Tim Tebow or Johnny Manziel. Those weren't they never played for him. He had what he had, and he was a hell of a coach, man. He was a hell of a coach, and I don't know if you can, without a national championship, say, oh well, he's the second best coach in Georgia history, but he's damn good, and he deserves to get his credit.